Good afternoon and welcome to BCP Council's Ask the Leader sessions. Used to be called Facebook Live, but we're now across all of our platforms. So welcome to anybody joining us on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, etc. And please ask your questions as we go. Today's session is one of our hour-long sessions. We've been trying to introduce some themed sessions, so we go into a bit more detail in a specific area. And last Friday we published what we hope to be the budget for the next 12 months, starting from April. So specific questions today around what we're proposing in the budget and what that's ultimately going to do. I've got a couple of people with me today later. I've got Phil Broadhead, who's the Deputy Leader of the Council, and Adam Richens, who is our Director of Finance. So we should have enough people here to answer any questions that you like. So please fire away. Before we do that, what I'm going to do is, as we always do, is do a quick run through of our COVID situation. Still very important to sort of update people on that every couple of weeks. Really quite good news in the last 2 weeks. So our numbers have fallen quite significantly, reflecting the national picture. So within the last 7-day period, they've gone down about 30%. So we've got the last numbers I saw, we around about 790 people per 100,000, and that's gone down, like I said, 30%. At the previous height, that was over 900, and actually back over a year ago, and it had been as much as 1,500 in the last few weeks as we saw the Omicron variant really go through. So that's coming down rapidly now. And also we've had about a similar reduction in hospitalisation. So hospitalisation now is down at 65 compared to 95 we had, I think last time I shared those numbers. Still, massively high transmission. So we need to try and do the things we can about ventilation, etc. So please, those hand washing, etc. So please, the main thing we can do is get vaccinated. So for those, we had a really strong, over 90% of people first and second doses. A huge amount has gone through with a third dose, but still opportunity to get that number higher. So whether you haven't had a vaccine yet or you're looking to do your top up, really important to look at it as we go back effectively into our Plan A measures, with Plan B being cancelled in the next week. Okay, great. So thank you very much for that. What I'll do now is we've got a few slides which the team are going to run through, which I'll talk to for just a couple of minutes to give some of the main points around the budget proposals. These are online as well, so the full budget report is online, which throughout today we'll be putting links up to where people can access that, and also hopefully in the chat bar as well. Then I'll introduce Adam and Phil, and then we'll get into your questions. So hopefully we'll have enough time today. So if we could get to the next slide, please. So as a very overview, this budget we're proposing puts a significant amount of extra investment into children's services and our adult services. So it's absolutely designed to be a people's budget for those people who need it. We're also trying to make sure we're investing a significant amount in the community in general, and I think it's well known that the budget situation in local government is tough. So we've got significant extra costs going up in terms of children and adults, but we need to support. But at a time when council tax raising is capped, and its position of this administration is, our Conservative administration, that we don't want to look to council tax to fund extra services. We appreciate there's a cost of living challenge at the moment, high inflation. So we're trying very much to make sure it's a sustainable future, both for the council and also for the public. So this also is a first year. We're looking at an MTFP, a medium-term financial plan. So it's our budget for the next 5 years. And what it does is it largely gets to balance in that 5-year period. There's still some challenges ahead, but we've come from a situation where we've had significant deficits, and we're now closing that gap. And we believe that over the course of the next 5-year period, we can actually continue to close that gap. So we believe what we're doing is a bit more financially resilient for the future as well, while we're not losing sight of the fact that we're trying to deliver on our big plan of creating an absolutely world-class city region across Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. We've got everything we need, all the ingredients we need, so let's really push forward and make sure we're investing where we can. Okay, so a little bit more detail on some of the numbers now. So we'll go to the next slide. Yeah, so I've talked about this at a high level, but across adults and children, that's 24 million, over 24 million pounds that is being ring fenced and dedicated to vulnerable children, our education system, as well as adults in need of our support. One of the things we're doing, outside of that pure, now people agenda, we've launching a £20 million investment in a green futures fund aimed at tackling climate change head on and supporting us to be carbon neutral by 2030. So this is one of the first councils in the country, and of a scale we haven't seen in other local councils, bringing forward a huge investment into making sure we are actually going to be delivering on our climate emergency that we as a council have accepted. We are going to turn Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole as a 10th largest council in the country. We're going to start to lead nationally in terms of some of our investment in green infrastructure as well. So that's £20 million purely at our discretion to be investing in the climate. We've then £5 million again. I think a lot of people have seen the success of things like Festival Coast Live. So if you haven't seen that, please look out for it coming up this summer. A real range of events to build a real vibrant place, putting more money into that, more money into arts and culture. We talked about our big plan and regeneration opportunities there. So there's further investment into regeneration. Really crucially, we've also talked about both delivering a higher standard of cleanliness and safety, so cleaner, greener, safer, and levelling up across of our conurbation as well. So we've known for years Christchurch has had a lack of investment in street cleaning when it's compared to other parts of the BCP conurbation, so Bournemouth and Poole. So we're levelling up the investment in Christchurch. People should start to really see that now, and I think we've got more detail of that on the next slide. Yeah, so in that whole cleaner, greener, safer. So this means street cleaning. This means our community safety officers. So those uniformed officers that are helping us engage and tackle antisocial behaviour. We have done a huge investment in terms of both of those areas, because we've said continually we need to make sure people can be absolutely proud of their town centres, proud of where they live. And there's a lot, we've done a lot. We've put a lot of investment in over the last 18 months. There's a huge amount further to go. We haven't landed where we need to be on that. So there's an extra £8.2 million for cleaner, greener, safer, summer readiness. And also we're launching something called a pothole patrol. The state of our roads aren't good enough. We need to be more active in terms of how we're going to be addressing that. So in all of that pride of place element, we saw what happened on the beaches, 18 months ago. It was a previous administration. We've put a significant amount more funding and delivered I think everybody would say a more organised, summer last year. We're repeating that investment going forward as well. So please we go to the next slide. Literally one more minute and then we will be getting into the questions, but wanted to do this introduction. Back to the pride message. We've had over 20% increase in people contacting us since pre-pandemic. Since November 19 is the figure we've used it for, and our customer services capacity hasn't kept up with that. So what we're addressing that, we're saying as we're moving towards our transformation program of making sure anybody can contact the council digitally if they want to, but those to create more space for those who want to still phone up or go in to see somebody. And while we're getting to that, through our investment in systems, we're putting an extra £1.5 million in over the next year in terms of improving the customer service offer. So when people contact the council, they can get through to us quickly and responsibly and get the answer they need. So it should be a really visible difference there. Next slide, please. Yeah, and how and this, I think this is really an interesting point here, because it's how we're going to fund this. So we are, and I'll talk in this slide in a minute about we've not wanted to fund all this through council tax. But I can come on to that. What we've managed to do, what we've looked to do, is hopefully again to be quite innovative. So as a council, we own a huge amount of some land, buildings, assets, effectively. So what we wanted to do was to make use of those more commercially, rather than just sell off assets. So we've got a transformation program which balances our budget over the 5-year period, and it will ultimately be making 40 to 50 million pounds of savings every year, continuing. But we needed to fund that. The previous administration were looking to fund that through capital receipts, i.e. selling our assets. I don't think that it's right for councils to be selling our assets. We need to be accumulating more assets so for future generations can at the very least have us inherit the assets we've got. We're going to go further than that. So what we've managed to do is to look at our assets, and we will be bringing in a refinancing, effectively a capital receipt for our looking at our beach huts. Effectively, so where we can keep ownership of those within the council. So we're going to sell them to a council, a company 100% owned by the council, to generate a £54 million receipt, which we then invest across our transformation programme to be saving in the region of £50 million a year every year. So we're stopping a fire sale of our council assets, and we're just using and financing our current assets differently to fund this programme. And then I think we go on to a slide about council tax. Yes, great, thank you. So as I've said before, we are absolutely committed to not going back to the taxpayer to fund our investments, or in our services. What we've done is we've looked at our assets to bring money in, i.e. the £54 million I've just talked about, and that allows us to put council tax up as significantly less than other authorities across the country are doing so. So last year we put council tax up by an average of 1.55%, and we harmonised across the conurbation. So it's the first time Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole at the same level of council tax, an average increase of 1.55%. That was the second lowest council tax rise in the country. So at a time when most people were putting council tax up 5%, or 4.99%, we put it at 1.55%, and that saved £7.3 million last year from money that would have been collected from residents and hasn't been. So there's £7.3 million more in people's pockets because of that decision last year. We're doing that again this year, in the fact that what we're doing, we're having there's two parts of council tax. There's the main core council tax, which we're allowed to raise by 1.99%. We're not doing that this year, so we're delivering a council tax free, so 0% rise on that council tax, and that equates to 4.4 million. And then the second part is the adult social care precept, which will be going up, I believe it's 4%. So look out on your council tax bills. You're going to see council tax freeze, adult social care precept. You'll have in the police precept, and then depending on where you are in the conurbation, the precept you pay for town councils. But you clearly see that the council tax element has been frozen. So collectively over 2 years, that means there's an extra £11.7 million in the pockets of our residents than other comparative places nationally who've been putting council tax up the maximum they've been allowed to. Okay, I believe I just check it. Are there any more slides? If there's not, I think we're going to go to, I'll just introduce, yeah, fantastic, great. So apologies, that took a little bit longer than I intended, but it's worth hopefully setting the scene for some of that, and I see a lot of questions are coming in now. As I said, we've got Adam Richens, who's our Director of Finance, who is here as when we need him, and has strategy responsibility for our budget as well, so we'll be able to help on any technical questions. And what I might do now, actually, Phil, can I just introduce you? Phil Broadhead's the Deputy Leader of the Council. So, anything you would like to say, well, before we get into the questions? Phil.
Well, thanks, Drew. I think we've covered most of the points, but I think just to underline, you mentioned earlier, this is going to be a tough year for a lot of people. We've got the cost of living, which is still increasing for a lot of people. We've got the energy costs, which are, kind of coming out of nowhere and are kind of looming over us. So as you pointed out, we are absolutely committed to use all the powers that we have to make sure that we keep as much money in people's pockets as possible. So we believe we are the only council, one of the only councils, certainly of our size in the country, that will be delivering that council tax freeze for the council tax base, which, as you've seen, is £11 million kept in people's pockets over the last 2 years. And I think that's a really positive thing that we're trying to do. But that doesn't mean we're not investing. And again, every single area which the council controls, we're putting huge amounts more money into. £25 million into our most vulnerable with children and adult services. We put a few extra investments into things that we thought were important last year, which is about £5 million. And because we've now unlocked the budget in this way, we're able to put them into the long term. So all of those extra things we put into events to bounce back from the pandemic, and extra money onto community safety officers, we've got more of them than ever before, as well as that £8.2 million of what I kind of think of as our above and beyond fund, areas where we're good at, but we want to be absolutely even better on. And a lot of that is going to go down to making sure that our streets, our town centres in particular, are as clean and safe as possible. So £8 million extra going into them as well, all the while keeping council tax frozen. So I think it's a really positive message. I think the final thing, there is a bit of chatter about how do we fund this and what choices do we have to make, and the way that we are doing it by looking at our assets and trying to release a value, I think is absolutely how people work in their normal lives. If you want to upgrade your kitchen or do your wiring in your house, you don't fund that by selling off the end of your garden. What you do is you release some of the value in your own home as kind of like a mortgage. It's exactly what we're trying to do with the estate. We own hundreds of millions, probably billions of pounds worth of assets, and the value is locked in there. So releasing some of that to invest in now, I think, is a really good way of actually making sure that we are able to deliver that transformation, but keep money in people's pockets as well. So we've got loads of time today to answer more specific questions on where we are investing and where we're putting extra money. But this is certainly the first budget I can remember where we are not only freezing that core council tax, but investing into all of the things that are important for most people.
Okay, Phil, thank you very much. That's great. So let's kick into some of those questions. And thanks for the ones already coming in. Let's go to, first of all, actually, we talked about it a bit, but Mandy Dryden has a question at 1 o'clock today. Hopefully there's a budget to smarten and clean up Bournemouth Town Centre. It's looking shabby. Mandy, thank you for the question. Absolutely, yes. So when we became an administration, 1st of October, nearly 18 months ago now, we had a pride of place agenda at our 100-day plan. So we immediately put some money into our town centres. That hasn't gone far enough, bluntly. So we're raising the bar again with that. So there's specifically £3 million going into aspects under our cleaner, greener, safer, over £3 million cleaner, greener, safer agenda. That's exactly going to be doing things like street cleaning. It's also going to be doing things like, there's an extra 10 this year on top of the extra 6 of last year, extra community safety officers. So resources we can have to patrol and work in town centres, to work with people to effectively get into a standard that we can all be proud of. We've worked really well with the BIDs, the business improvement districts, and we did a pilot last summer in Poole Town Centre. It was the first pilot we did, and now we're going to be rolling it out further. So it's stuff like painting of street furniture, replacement of broken furniture, that type of thing, as well as on top of all of the stuff we're doing around more street cleaning and more people on antisocial behaviour, more greening as well. So Mandy, sorry, long answer there, but there's a lot of work going in that area. We agree with you, absolutely categorically agree with you. Bournemouth and Christchurch and Poole Town centres, and also our other areas. We've got 19 centres effectively, not just the 3 town centres. Need investment, and that's what this budget does. Okay, let's have a look at what. Yeah, so we've got a question about listening to residents. One of the reasons why we're doing this today, actually, I think for the first time, is to really give an opportunity to hear more from residents as well on the budget. So thank you for the engagement. We do. Okay, we've got a question about 4% rise isn't zero. Well, really clearly, I just come on to that. So absolutely. So there is a adult social care. Government ask us to fund or ask adult social care to be funded through something called an adult social care precept. So we're just effectively collecting that money on behalf of government, and that is the 4% that Stuart's talking about. But in our core council tax of the 1.99%, we're freezing that. You'll have seen from the slide which talked about over £11 million of council tax we haven't collected in the 2 years, so last year and what we're proposing this year. As a matter of fact, we are pursuing one of the lowest council tax rise policies in the country. So Stuart, yeah, absolutely, I hear that. One of the, but it's a matter of fact that we are being really aggressive and not letting the cost go to council taxpayers. Worth saying as well, the adult social care precept will get us in the region of 8.4 million. It's between 8 and 9 million. It's effectively, so that will be raised from that. We're putting nearly 25 million pounds into just people services alone. So over it's 12 million pounds into adult services and 12 million pounds again into children's services. So we raised 4%, which is 8 million pounds on the government's behalf. We're investing nearly 25 million. So and that's ring fence for vulnerable adults and children. So you can see we're not putting the onus on the council taxpayer. Okay, Phil, I believe Justine Hefferin 117 had a question there, and then I'll go back up to the top. So I haven't seen that question, but Phil, perhaps if you could have a look at it. Do you want to start on that, Phil, or shall I? Up to you.
Yeah, I think this is about the financing, which clearly, Drew, you're better on than I am. But it's all about how we're funding the transformation program, and one of the ways that we're doing that is looking at our beach hut estate and essentially setting up a company which will be fully owned by the council, so that we can then release the money that is currently in the beach huts in order to be able to fund our transformation program, but crucially not have to sell the assets. So as you said earlier on, Drew, if we want to invest in making sure that our council is fit for the 21st century, that costs money. There's two ways of doing that. The plan that we inherited was to sell a lot of the council-owned buildings. We were really committed not to be able to do that. And with all of the money and the value that we've got in our assets, this is a really neat way of being able to unlock them without having to sell them. Now, this doesn't really, on the face of it, change. Well, it doesn't change the ownership of these, because we will still be owning the company that essentially that buys them. And again, what it doesn't do is change the current situation with the beach huts. So because we still have control over them, and the beach huts is one example, it doesn't mean that on the ground, the rents will change. We will make all of those decisions as we would in any other year. So really, this is all about just using the tools available to us to make sure that we can invest in the future without affecting services, and crucially without having to sell off all the family silver, which I think is really, really important to most people.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Phil. And just to clarify, then, so we're preparing a list of frequently answered questions, and one of those will say, there's absolutely no change effectively in terms of pricing structure or who's able to get them or not at this stage effectively, and it's still ultimately going to be the council in control of that company. So again, no change there. I'll go to a question. I've already answered one from Mandy Dryden, but I'll touch on it briefly. Another question, 107. Any plans for tackling the homeless situation? So Mandy, we answered a question around cleaner, greener, safer and town centres and extra investment in there. One of the things we've also done is there's over £100,000 being targeted into the health hub. Effectively and that's targeted at homeless people, and it's the first of its kind in Bournemouth Town Centre. So that's a place where we just literally received heads of terms about buying that asset as well. So we wanted to create a place in the town centre where we were able to bring all of the agencies together. So that's our housing from the council, it's health effectively, and in a place that and in a way that homeless people wanted to interact with. So we've been committed. Anybody who is homeless, we're aware of, and we are trying desperately to place into accommodation. Some people don't, want to engage in the way we have done historically. So what we're trying to do is to create a way where they can engage differently and wrap around services when they need them, or when they're able or in a position to respond to them. So we put £100,000 in this budget into the health hub. And we're also looking at buying that building for, I can't disclose for some, but again, multiple hundreds of thousands of pounds of investment. So there is significant. The government have been really clear. They've given us real support throughout the pandemic to bring people in. We will bring absolutely anybody in who wants to come in. And for those people who still don't want to, use our services, we're going to try and find different ways of supporting them, gaining their confidence and their trust, so we can help them. As well. Okay, thank you. So let me have a look now and see where else we go. And by all means, Phil, Adam, if there's anything you want to come in on specifically, please do. Okay, CCTV. So Rowena Ross, 109. So thank you very much. Some budget will be spent on up-to-date CCTV, so we feel safer. Absolutely, yeah, categorically. I don't have the specific detail to hand, but as part of our investment into cleaner, greener, safer, we've done two things on CCTV. We've enabled much more CCTV and investment in CCTV, but then the really important bit is then putting people, operatives in front of it, so it can be responsive. So it's not just a recording; it's there as a tool for us. So that there is, this budget absolutely drives down and delivers on what you're asking for there for Rowena. We'll just touch on, we've also got a significant investment in our summer response. One of the things that worked fantastically well last year, and we were really fortunate in our partnership with other agencies to be able to put in, was it's called a MAC. So I think multi-agency command centre, effectively. So that was able to put all of the people responding in the same room, CCTV, availability as well. So we were able to, across partner agencies, respond on the summer. That worked really well on the summer, in a summer response. So we're doing that again, but it's also given us more confidence. Effectively, we can see the benefit of investing in CCTV and CCTV operatives. So hopefully that answers your question, Rowena. And I'll now look down. Fine. Okay. Let's see what else we can. I'm just having to look through some questions. Okay, so Bridget Barnes has asked a question in terms of the cycle lanes. I think it's an important distinction. Just to make here, Bridget, thanks for your comments. We've obviously got quite interesting debate across the conurbation on cycle lanes. It needs to be clear that our Transforming Cities Fund programme is a £100 million capital programme, which is around about £80 million of government money and £20 million of local authority money. And that is across a long period. In this budget, this is separate to that. So we are not able to use that money to invest in services. So that's money given to us by government to invest in local infrastructure, cycle lanes. So it cannot be used for any other purposes. So I just need to make the clear distinction. Money being spent on cycle lanes is largely national money. It's capital money. It can't be invested in services. So what we're talking about today is different from that. Hopefully there was an explanation in that was helpful. Okay, I'm going to have a question now from John Twitchin on the Green Futures Fund, and then sorry, I'm hogging all the questions, Phil. So, is there anything else you'd like to come in on? Please do come in. But let me do the Futures Fund first. So John, thank you very much for that. I'll just do a little bit in terms of the climate investment we put in effectively. So again, we've been in administration for under 18 months now. But what we inherited was, really quite limited. I think that's fair to say. Budget in terms of climate. There was an ambition to put, I believe, £240,000 in, but that had been effectively taken out because of the 50 million funding gap the other administration had. And until that was resolved, they weren't going to put it back in. What we were able to do was to go in and put that money back in, look at how we finance the council differently. We put an extra, then we doubled it effectively. So we put forward £480,000. That's about the people who will be doing this work and who'll be leading us through this. There's no point having people telling you what to do and coming up with great ideas if you haven't got any ability to effectively fund some of the changes, that they would like to make. So we thought it was fundamental to make sure if we're really serious about climate neutrality and trying to lead the country on some of these things, then we needed to put our money where our mouth is, and we've done that. So it's about a real investment. Your question more specifically, John, was how we'll prioritise projects, and we're really interested in we want to make this a really community-led piece of work. So by all means, we want ideas and suggestions from the community. It is a £20 million fund at our discretion to invest in. It's capital effectively. So it's by that means stuff you can kick and touch and see, rather than people time, but it's £20 million available. We've got like I said, our enhanced team who are looking to come up with solutions and ideas to spend that money, but we massively want to engage the community in that as well. So anybody with any ideas, we can make a difference with that, and we can make decisions quickly. Phil, is there anything you wanted to say on the climate situation, generally, or that money while I look for some other?
Well, just to say, I mean, this time last year we launched our Futures Fund, which was in and of itself really innovative at the time. £50 million of money that was our money to be able to spend on our priorities. So not having to go to government with a begging bowl, not having to make sure that it was a purely business case based decision, as a lot of the funding things that the council have to do. And that's really opened up some, really placemaking things that we've always wanted to do that has been quite difficult to fund. And we're still looking at ways that we can use that £50 million Futures Fund to go even further. So, improving our streets. We're looking at proposals for, some of our promenades in, the more kind of coastal locations. And again, that regeneration agenda that we've got, particularly in Poole, to making sure that we have as many toilets as possible and a really great public realm around Poole Quay. All of that stuff we've been able to do. The £20 million Green Futures Fund is building on that, but actually going even further on our climate agenda. So I don't know any other council in the country that is committing, £20 million to taking climate change really seriously, but also looking at things that are actually going to make a difference. There's a bit of a tendency in the climate agenda to go for token or more kind of ideologically driven solutions. What we're really looking for are things that we can invest in that are going to really change the situation on the ground, that are going to cut carbon, that are going to make a real difference to climate change. So, £20 million is quite a lot of money to be able to go into that. As you said, Drew, we've now got the staff in place to be able to facilitate that. And as Drew said, if you've got ideas of things that you think we can invest in to help protect the climate in the long term, by all means, feed them in, because now is the time that we can actually get stuff done in the climate agenda arena.
Brilliant, thanks, Phil. I'm going to bring on one other question. It's about Boscombe and Boscombe regeneration, effectively. The question from Gary Sherborne at 1:13 is more about a specific project, but I thought it might be an opportunity. There might be something in that to answer, but to talk about some of the regen. I know we've got the Towns Fund and also our extra regen work in Boscombe. So perhaps we could just talk about Boscombe regen for a moment.
Yeah, so I mean, Boscombe's another area of kind of huge extra effort at the moment. We've been really fortunate in getting over £20 million from government as part of the Towns Fund deal to put directly into Boscombe. We've got really big plans there. As part of that, that will be looking at replacing the Sovereign Centre with a completely refurbished new kind of town centre to Boscombe. Also looking at how the Boscombe High Street connects to the seafront, so including Boscombe Gardens, including a number of other parks that we've got around there, because regeneration isn't just about pretty buildings. Quite often it's about the community as well. One of the other really innovative things that we're doing is looking at the Royal Arcade in Boscombe, which is an absolutely beautiful architectural building, looking at trying to acquire that, completely refurbishing it. But already we've got businesses going into there now. We've got our new kind of innovation hub, which is opening up shortly, which is bringing really kind of on the cusp digital businesses, because Boscombe is already a digital hub. So yes, I know the question mentioned EU funds in the past. We've now had a lot of that replaced by government spending, and we're also exploring how we can leverage that money that we're getting from government to go even further. So huge plans for Boscombe. What I love about the Boscombe Towns Fund is it's a proper community effort. The Towns Fund project has everyone from Jeff Mostyn from the AFC Bournemouth on the board, but community representatives, shop owners, all coming together to really improve Boscombe. So we've got that huge cash injection. Only in the last few weeks, we've just launched completely free Wi-Fi all along Boscombe High Street, super fast Wi-Fi, which we're looking to extend as part of our fibre optic programme all the way through to Folkestone Station. You'll have seen the money that we've just agreed at the last full council into a huge upgrade of Folkestone Station as well, including new lifts to make it accessible after 20, 30 years. So an area of huge priority. And again, the extra investment we're putting in this budget helps us to underpin to actually get that stuff done on the ground.
Yeah, great, Phil. Thank you. A couple of quick questions I'll just answer. So we're not just looking at sort of positive stuff. A couple of people have said, we're effectively keep talking about the previous administration, effectively, and I think it's fair to, because effectively, we did come in at a time still right in the middle of a COVID pandemic, but we've completely changed the funding and financing of the council, and we've been able to come forward and say it's not good enough just because you're in a time of crisis not to work out how to invest in people, invest in our great place effectively. So there is a real clear choice. We had a completely different strategy, and we're delivering on it, so we can prioritise things like children investment, adults investment, at clean and green and safe we've talked about. We said in opposition that we needed to bring in our children were suffering, and we needed to bring in a COVID catch-up fund effectively. That was rejected by the previous administration. We immediately did it effectively. So I think it's fair to say what we've done differently. A lot of good stuff was done by that. And then one other question, and where was it? It's about our pay effectively. So Lee Atkins, 117, the leader and deputy leader getting paid stupid money to ignore the residents. Well done. Well, Lee, thanks very much for your comment. One, I think very much we're not ignoring residents, but also I just, what I get paid to do this role is effectively it's an £18,000 a year allowance. It was 30,000, but I gave up 40% of that, and my entire cabinet gave up an extra 10% as well. So Lee, thank you, just to give some clarity to that. Got a question a bit later on from Claire Hutton, 122. Really important question about children's social care. Really needs more money. Families being left with little support. Children with disabilities leaving in other teams as overstretched. Claire, look, we've got to be straight. So we put in a significant amount of money last year into children's services. I've got the number and I'll deliver it in a minute. But effectively, over the 2 years, there's over £20 million, which is so we've moved it from I believe it was 60 million investment to over 80. So we've massively put extra investment. Over £12 million of it is in this budget. So that's money that hasn't been spent yet. It's going to be spent next year. It's what we're talking about. So the largest outside of the £20 million capital green fund is over £12 million investing in our children's services. Because Claire, we think you're right. We think there needs to be further investment. We've made sure that children is absolutely the number one priority of his council, and we are going to effectively a huge amount of good work is done in that area, but we need to support the teams with more. So that is more for the first time, certainly in my memory, certainly more money that's going into children's services as a rise than adults. Effectively, so we're putting in a significant amount of money in a time when we're trying to also do that without taking money from council taxpayers to do that. Okay, let me just have a look at what else we want to put in. We've got a John Twitchin at 112. Alex Sketcher at 131. Let's go to that one. I'm sorry, I've just found a number effectively. It was £7.5 million investment into children's services last year, and it's over £12 million this year. So collectively gets to a £20 million investment over 2 years. But if we could now go to Alex Sketcher's question at 131, please.
Shall I take this to start with, Drew?
If you could, so that'd be great. Yeah.
Not particularly around the budget, but it's something that's quite close to you and I, because this is actually in our ward, and this is potential developments coming forward for a private hospital on Highmore Farm in Talbot Heath, and asking us what our thoughts are. Well, I think it's fair to say, Alex, and you'll have heard me on talking about this on the radio this morning. This is a proposal that hasn't come through formally yet. We heard about it on Facebook alongside you. It is in an area that has already been identified in the previous pool local plan for development. So on the face of it, development there has been planned for some time, but it's only just coming to fruition what that could be. I think needless to say, I won't speak for Drew, he can come in, but we've got some concerns about what we've seen, particularly the extent of the development. I think there were plans for a 4-storey car park, which in this very delicate location would clearly not be right. It is worth saying this isn't about Talbot Heath. This is a current farm that's already there. But I do think there could be a solution, and what we're looking at exploring with the landowners there, that farm that is there is kind of a part of the local community, and whether there was a way to look at trying to protect that in the future. So we will be exploring, first of all, if those proposals come forward, are they right? Are they too big? Are they going to be relevant for the residents, and make sure that we speak up on behalf of that? Secondly, look at some innovative ways of whether, because because there are urban farms all around the country that work and become more of a community asset. Wouldn't that be fabulous to kind of retain that in some form? The final point is around biodiversity. This is a really, really sensitive ecological area, and biodiversity is really, really important, particularly here. We are one of the first councils in the country to be embedding a brand new policy around increasing biodiversity net gain into planning policy, and that will be coming into fruition shortly. And this will certainly be one of the areas that we want to see that embedded. That's all about making sure that you want to see an on-site increase in biodiversity by 10% over a long period, over 30 years, before any development is allowed to take place. So, rather than development going up and making biodiversity worse, the new actual government legislation doesn't come in for 2 years. We're getting ahead of that and doing it now, making sure that any development actually makes biodiversity better rather than worse. And nowhere is there a more important area than here, so close to the heath and right in the middle of our ward as well. So, thanks for your question, Alex. We're absolutely all over this. We'll be looking at any planning application if it comes in. We're also going to explore creative solutions on how we can potentially look at trying to not just increase biodiversity, but maybe even look at the future of that farm, for a more long-term basis.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. And Alex, thanks for your question. You referenced, I did live locally up until quite recently, and just absolutely share Phil's sentiment. I know how important that area is to people locally, and I'm really, nervous about any future development there. We're starting a really good dialogue now with the Talk Village Trust, and we have those aspirations to protect and enhance what is there, and actually if we can make it better and make it more. So we're committed as a council in terms of having that dialogue to say what we can do and where we can step up. I think we need to look and say as well, Talk Village Trust, look, they're a charitable organisation, so we know that they want to build. They invest over £1 million a year locally. So we want to support them, but we need to build some confidence with them to make sure what they're coming up with can actually work for local residents. And Phil's absolutely right about the urban farm concept as well, and extending that. So because it's absolutely amazing. Through the last lockdown, every day walked across the heath with my children, and seeing the animals there was a med. So, and I think we all know how important through the last 18 months has been getting outside, and sort of enjoying what's around us. So, thank you very much for the question. I'm going to just touch. I know we talked about it before, but let's go into a bit more detail on it because Charlton Lafari has asked a question in terms of money to buy the beach huts, public assets. What are you borrowing the money from? How much is it going to cost us to service this debt, and when it would need to be paid back? So effectively, we have let's take a step back here. We have a choice here. So we've identified a transformation program. It's all about putting BCP Council, 3 councils together, 3 organisations together, and by doing that, you can make them more efficient. But that costs money to do, to work out how to do it properly. So we've got a transformation program that was looking at costing us £40 million across the life of it, effectively. But what it would deliver for us is £40 to £50 million worth of savings every year. So if you spend £4, you'll get £4 to £5 back every year, and you only have to spend the initial £4 once. So it makes absolutely sense, and was at the heart of what putting Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole councils together much more efficient, which means we can do all of the investment and millions of pounds of investment we're talking about without having to raise council taxes higher. So we had a choice really. If we want to do that, one, yes we do. How are we going to pay for it? And what we inherited was a plan to use effectively half capital receipts, so selling assets, permanently selling assets, and the other half was normal revenue money, which we've now been able to release into the budget to spend on things like the over £12 million in investment in children's services this year, etc. So effectively, what we've said is let's look at how else we can fund this. So we're using one of our assets. We're absolutely categorically not looking at selling anything. We want to make sure our children inherit more of an asset base than we have, and we've changed that policy. So the debt you're talking about is third-party debt. So other banks or financial institutions will effectively primarily put that money in. There's more detail in the paper. The plan is over a 20-year period. Effectively, that debt will be paid back over 20 years by the income from the beach huts. So not changing anything in terms of the beach hut occupiers noticing any difference because of that transaction. there is a part actually where this enables us to invest more money in the beach huts and also on our seafront as well. So actually, the only change people are going to see is actually more investment in the huts, but that's not what this question is about. So and also it's a very, we have a really strong ability. We're a very financially stable institution, so any debt we borrow is cheap. Then also, this is a good reliant income stream, so the debt is very cheap. So there is a cost, there's always a cost to debt, but then there's a massive cost to not investing to deliver £50 million a year of savings every year, and also not releasing money to put into our services. So, Charlton, hopefully that was, this is a technical piece, and so apologies if any of that's too technical. But the crux there is we want to invest in the council. We're doing that. It's going to make it more efficient. Great. It's going to save £40 to £50 million a year. At the time we're doing it, we want to be investing in our place, in our people, and that's what we're doing. We're doing as well. And the third part is we're adamant that this council is going to be leaving future generations with more assets. So we're stopping the fire sale of assets that we talked about in opposition and effectively inherited to fund this programme. So hopefully that's of some use, and that people won't mind us going and talking about that again.
While we're on that subject, just kind of one more point to underline about what actually, because it's quite a complicated and kind of technical piece of accountancy more than anything else. But the impact of what that means on real people, I think, can't be understated. We've been talking here about a budget that is putting more money into all of our services than pretty much any council in the country, and certainly anything that the BCP or preceding councils have done for some time. So, we've talked about just £25 million extra on our most vulnerable alone, quite aside from extra money into potholes and street cleaning and all the services. And because of that mechanism that you just talked about, we're able to do that without increasing council tax, the base council tax, by a single penny. And I mean, that is, what difference that makes to people on the ground, I think can't be overstated this time. And actually, it goes even deeper when you look into the impact that has per towns, because we've come together as one council. We came from different council tax rates as well in the past. So to take Christchurch as an example, Christchurch council taxpayers now are on average in a Band D paying about £260 per year less than if BCP hadn't have come into being. So put that over the course of the council by next year when the elections are, each household in Christchurch will be £1,000 roughly better off, have paid £1,000 less in council tax because of all the efficiency savings we're doing as part of this programme, and also the financial resilience that we're doing. So that's what difference this real make. Now, we do have other options. We could just keep putting council tax up by the maximum, but in this environment, it just seems sensible to try and keep as much money into people's pockets as possible. And then finally, just to underline that financial credibility, one of the things that we're also doing, quite unusually for local councils, we're actually putting more money into our reserves as well. So we've got our unearmarked reserve section, which is our kind of rainy day fund. And actually this year, alongside freezing council tax, alongside, all of this investment we're doing in services, we're also increasing our reserves because we want to make sure that compared to other councils, we're at least at the midpoint, if not higher. And this puts us as one of the more higher reserve level councils for our competitors in the country. So council tax freeze, investment like never before, £1,000, better off just in Christchurch, and more money into our reserves. So, I think talking about financial credibility, you probably can't get much stronger than that. And I think, we're really proud of what we've been able to unlock on that.
Yeah. Thanks, Phil. It's really helpful to put that across. So and I think it's over the 5-year period as well, we're getting to a level point, or towards a level point, which means it's good for financial credibility. And it's across that 5-year period that we're moving the earmarked reserves up to that middle point, and then hopefully above in that period as well. So hopefully that's helpful. And certainly what we talked about in terms of fiscal prudence, financial prudence. I've got a question from Jude Tuffin, just to be really at 1:38, just a brief one. I think it's a reasonable question to answer. So Jude, thank you for it. We're talking about bringing a £20 million futures fund for climate, a green futures fund for climate. If people will be sort of speculating about what we're intending to spend that on, I can say, Jude, that there is no plan at all around wind farm that's on our table. It's certainly not something we're looking at in that instance. we don't think we need to in the first instance. There are a myriad of other ways we can spend money, and there's a significant number of solar farms and opportunities we're looking at, but there are other investments as well. So Drew, just a quick answer, but hopefully that was helpful. Okay, let me see what else we've got. Okay. So Lucy Allen's talking about 142 lighting on a section of the prom, Canvercliff, Branksome Beach, be part of the transformation seafront strategy. Lucy, I think it's a really interesting question. We're currently looking at our seafront strategy, which I know you've I believe in one of your roles you've been commenting on, which is really helpful. We are looking, we've got a big plan, and we've got a £50 million futures fund, which is helping us unlock some of it. And one of the 5 key elements of the big plan is seafront. We're trying to make sure there's more investment going into the seafront. We're doing that in a number of ways. We're doing that in terms of pop-ups. We're in conversations with people like Rockwater are coming in and investing in the area as well. So what we now need to do is to work out what else we do. So we put hundreds of £1,000s into toilets. We're going further on toilets on the seafront. We put some investment into barbecues so people can have free barbecues on the seafront. And now we're looking at what's next. So although there's nothing immediate about that lighting section, because I appreciate it is different between Poole and what was historic Bournemouth. We in our futures fund there's things now about electrification of the prom, across the prom, effectively to support all of that as well. So I can say quite clearly, we are looking at it, Lucy, and now we'll over the next 6 to 12 months we'll have a really clear plan about what that extra investment is going to be. And actually, and Lucy's next question actually was about the thank you for your efforts to keep the prom clear of sand. Yeah, and Lucy, so that particularly in the budget we've talked about slides earlier on, that's in our summer response effectively. So we didn't have money 2 years ago to make the level of sand clearance that we did. We put it in this year, needs it, because otherwise people really can't use it, and it needs to look, if it's going to look world class, we need to make sure we look after the stand of it. So appreciate your comments there, Lucy. Okay. I'll just have a look at some other questions. Mandy Patricia's asked a question at 1:47. Why are people still freezing on the streets? Plenty of empty shops could be adopted. Mandy, we talked about this briefly earlier on, so let me just come back on this. Anybody who wants to come in off the streets, we absolutely categorically will home and house. So let's just be really clear about that. It is a hugely complex area. There are often some significant substance abuse issues, mental health problems. So what we need to do, Mandy, is it's not just enough. It hasn't been enough, and it's not good enough that it isn't enough. But to just go and say, look, please, this is how you can engage with us and have a house at home, effectively. So what we've done is we put over £100,000 ongoing every year in this budget into the health hub that we're looking to set up in Bournemouth Town Centre, and also the capital investment in buying it that we'll be doing. So we are trying really hard to follow the government and what they've done around extra investment into homeless. So it's not a case of needing more buildings. We're able to house and home people. It's about finding ways to build trust with them and engage with them, because we've got to have high standards of ambition for people who are vulnerable and sleeping on the streets, and also we've got to have higher ambition for what that looks like, makes our town centres look like as well. So it's trying to get that balance right, Mandy. So hopefully that helps. So there is extra investment this year in this budget going into it.
I think it's also worth just pointing out it's a huge cross-partner agency work on this as well. So we've got our partners, St Mungo's, who are our main partners that help us with those unfortunately suffer to find themselves rough sleeping. We work really closely with the police. We have people going out at 4 or 5 o'clock every morning to deal with the people that are out there that we know are there, that are refusing to come in a very kind of slowly, gently approach to try and deal with some of the issues that are making them choose to stay out there. So it is a really complicated situation.
Yeah.
You can see the number on the screen below, which is for our partner St Mungo's. So if you see anybody, I'm sure they're aware of them, but you never know. It's always worth touching base with them. The other point I think it's worth saying, and this is not a flippant comment at all, but we do regular checks, independent checks on how many rough sleepers we have on the streets. And at our most recent counts, we are now, I think, the lowest we've been for many years. So tremendous amount of work has been done. There are, by all accounts, fewer rough sleepers on the streets than certainly at their peak, but for quite a long time. Now the problem is those that are there are in very visual spots as well. But tremendous amount of work has been done. But as Drew's pointed out, these are often very complicated situations, and that's why it's really important that if you know of a rough sleeper, report them to the St Mungo's number, so that at the very least they're on their radar, because quite often it is a longer period that it takes to make sure that we get some of these people off. Meanwhile, what you don't see is all the work that goes on into the bigger problem of homelessness, of people that find themselves without a home. And very few people find themselves in a rough sleeping position, and we've got amazing teams. And only in the last week, as an example, we've just approved a new development on Herbert Avenue, which takes some of those people that are struggling to find themselves a home. A new development that's going over there, it's passive house standards, so it's meeting our eco credentials as well, to take again dozens of people and put them into longer term accommodation, because quite often it's not just about the quick fix, it's about making sure that then we're not just giving them a roof over their heads, but we're giving people that are struggling a path out and a path to a more long-term sustainable future. So we put hundreds of millions of pounds into that through that and our Seascape Homes, buying homes specifically for people that find themselves in a homeless situation. So loads of work going on, but it's really important, if you see somebody rough sleeping, report it to the St Mungo's number so that we can make sure that they're on our radar.
Great, Bill, thank you. And let's just do one more question about homelessness and while we've got it. Dawn Cox, I'll be relatively brief, 149. Dawn, you're absolutely right again about people just becoming homeless, pre-homeless effectively. So that's again one of the reasons why we want this, and the evidence says we need this health hub, this multi-agency team. So it's not just directly about people who are already on the streets. What we find before that is often a lot of sofa surfing or technically homeless. So we need to find a way of all partners in the same place at the same time being able to engage with somebody somebody ending up on the streets, and also while they are. So it's very much, Dawn, what we're talking about with the health hub, and that real investment there is about putting all of those people in one place to support that. So thank you, Dawn, for your question. Got something from YouTube, Bob's Blobbiat 151. Been no bins in more done. Well, thank you very much for that. What would I just pop up my email address, drew.mellor@bcpcouncil.gov.uk. So, but by all means, if you could actually give me your details on that, we'll come back to you with an answer. So through our Cleaner, Greener, Safer piece of work, we're doing a lot of investment. Talked about it before in more bins. Just look at the seafront. There's literally a huge amount more capacity, and we've done that in a lot of our town centres as well. If there's a specific problem in Moordown, I don't have that detail to hand, but we will look into it and then come back to you. So by all means, please do email drew.mellor@bcpcouncil.gov.uk if there are any specific problems. That one, absolutely, but any other specific problems as well, I'll be really happy to look that up for you. Only got a couple of minutes left now, so we're going to have to draw it to a relative close. Okay. Fine. So what I might do now is, if I just do a quick so thank you so much. I'll just have go through the top of the budget again, effectively. So what we're trying to do is invest massively around people. So that's a record investment going into children's and adults services, so vulnerable people in our community. It's a climate budget because we put £20 million, which is a huge amount of capital money made available to for climate investment. And it's done in a time of where we really know that there's a squeeze on people's expenditure. So we've done it with effectively one of the lowest over the last 2 years council tax rises in the country. So there's over £11 million of council tax we haven't collected over the 2 years. that means there is more in residents' pockets, and we're going to keep trying to do that. We're going to make sure we make the best use of our assets so we can keep being a low tax or one of the lower tax councils in the country. We're doing that at a time where we're giving we're projecting over 5 years some real good levels of financial sustainability for the council. There's still challenges in that, but we believe we're addressing them. Phil mentioned before, we are putting extra money into our unearmarked reserves. So let's be really clear about that. You've got earmarked reserves, which are specific projects or specific things you're worried about. We've actually been able to release quite a lot of that, which is great because of the financial sustainability we're moving into. And what we are doing, we're then moving up our unearmarked reserves. So basically our, as Phil called it, rainy day fund. What we inherited was actually sort of below average in terms of other councils, and we're moving that over a 5-year period to the median and then above it point is very much our aspiration. Okay, so let me just see if there's anything else we wanted to talk about. Fixing the potholes. We've got a question that just come in from Jeanette about fixing potholes. Again, I talked earlier on about the money coming from on cycle lanes isn't money that we're effectively investing. It's money coming down from government to us, but we can't spend it on other things. What we have to fix is potholes, and that's when in this budget puts in an extra £600,000, which is part of an extra £8.2 million one-off investment across 22-23. So there's significant extra money going into potholes. It's going to be called Pothole Patrol. So look out for that. We want it to be over and above what we're already doing, so we'd be more responsive. So we're looking at different ways we can engage on that. Brilliant. I thank you so much for all the questions. There was a huge amount. We didn't get through them all of them. What I'll do now is thank Phil and Adam very much for their support. Adam and his finance team have done a huge amount of work across the last 18 months throughout the pandemic to deliver, award-winning, or actually certainly award, definitely got some award categories around getting that support out to businesses. So we try to lead the way in that. We've got a fantastic team that's delivered that. Phil, is there anything you would like to say before we close out? We just want to slightly run over our hour.
No, I think you've covered. I mean, it's the highlights again, isn't it? I don't think there's any. Not that we want to peacock too much, Drew, but I don't think there is anywhere else in the country that's delivering a core council tax freeze and the level of investment we are. 25 million in our most vulnerable, 8 million in new priorities, 5 million embedding the other priorities. An extra in-year fund to make sure that we can pick up the phones better. I think that's a really important one as well. All the while, increasing our unearmarked reserves as well. So watch out for your council tax bill. You will see that freeze. And our aim as ever is to keep making sure that we improve services and keep as much money in people's pockets as possible.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you everybody. We've got 2 weeks time. We've got next one of these sessions, and very much look forward to it. We really like doing these theme sessions. I think we get some great feedback from them. So by all means, give us any comments on what you'd like to look at next. Hopefully this budget one was useful. So thank you everybody. Cheers.